Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the 100 Coaches Show. We're going to have a great show today. We've got a couple of wonderful guests. I will briefly introduce myself. We will introduce our guests, and then we'll get rolling. My name is Marshall. I'm from a small town called Valley Station, Kentucky. I went to school in Indiana. I got a PhD at UCLA. I was a college professor. I've been a dean. And for 43 years, I predominantly travel around the world speaking and teaching. I've been to 102 countries. And I have 11 million frequent flyer miles just on American Airlines. And I love speaking and teaching. And then I coach executives. I've been the coach of the CEO of Ford and Pfizer and Glaxo and World Bank. And I'm working on a really interesting new coaching process now called the LPR process with 50 amazing people, head of the Rockefeller Foundation, and all kinds of wonderful people doing that. So what I love about coaching is I learn so much. Then I write and edit books and articles. I've written or edited now 42 books, 6 bestsellers, 3 big bestsellers, and the others purchased by my mother, my father, and associated relatives. So writing is a lot of way I reach people. And came up with an idea called this 100 Coaches, which is fantastic, where the idea is, I try to give everything I know to everybody, and the only price is they get old, they do the same thing. And then we try to help each other get better and learn from each other and then share what we've learned. And there's no money and no guilt and no expectations. So just a wonderful, wonderful group of people. Now, today, who do we have with us today? Well, first, we have Alain, and then we have Tom. Alain Hunkins. Alain is a fascinating fellow. A little bit of background. He's the author of Cracking the Leadership Code, which is a great book. He spent 23 years training leaders. He's worked, I think, in 42 of the Fortune 100 companies. And before that, even more interesting, he had a background in the New York public school system. So very, very interesting background. And then a good friend of mine also, we have is General Tom Kolditz. Tom was a general from the Army, and he spent years training leaders in West Point, Yale, and now he's at Rice. And at Rice, he's the founder of the Doerr Leadership Institute, which is just amazing program he's doing where they're providing coaching to young people. And Tom is not only making a difference in Rice, he's making a difference in universities around the world. So the impact he's having is amazing. He was picked one of the top most influential global coaches in the world by Thinkers 50. By the way, Tom was also our partner on this broadcast. And so again, congratulations for that. And he's the author of In Extremis Leadership as well. So a couple of authors and a couple of doers. So thanks to both of you for being with us today. Thank you. Now let's begin. Thank you. Let us begin. I love the first little quote I got from you guys to talk about. We don't choose our crisis. Our crisis chooses us. So, Alain, you go first. What does that mean?
Well, Marshall, thank you, first of all, having me. It's great to be with you. And it's so interesting, this idea of crises, because I think a lot of people have said that anyone can steer a ship when the seas are calm. It's when the waves get rough that we're tested. And so, as we all know, going through the coronavirus pandemic and the turbulent times we're living in right now, all of us as leaders are being tested. And so it's a chance for us to step up and show up in terms of how we lead and thinking of the impact that we're going to have. What I found is that if you interview, and I have worked with many leaders over this, and ask them, what is the biggest quality that you admire in the people that you have followed? Calm always comes to the top of that list. So when we are in these crisis modes, calm is so important. And for us to realize that as leaders, we are always creating culture. And so are we creating culture by design, or are we doing it unconsciously by default? So that's why I like to think that we don't so much choose our crises as our crises choose us.
You know what? I'm going to make a little detour here. I'm reading a book now called Performance Under Pressure, which is really interesting, and it relates, Elon, exactly to what you said. We have kind of a myth, for example, about athletes that we call the clutch player. And the reality is it's just not true. People have done statistical analyses of this. Even Michael Jordan didn't do any better under the clutch. He missed a, high percentage of the last second shots. And we only remember the good ones. And actually we tend to perform less well under pressure, not better. And in looking at the book, one of the reasons is under pressure, being statistically free throws they measure, for example. People do worse. Almost everybody does worse. And the people that do the best are people that perform up to their normal level of doing their best. And one of the things he talks about is the calm. Just what you said, that's why I brought it up, that sometimes under pressure we tend to choke. And we tend to think I have to be heroic and I have to be somehow better now than I've ever been. And then we don't do the job we've done in the past. That's probably why you don't have surgeons operate on family members, because they're nervous, they're under pressure, and they don't do as well. I listened to one of the top hedge fund people in the world interview another one, and one guy was worth $1 billion, the other was worth $3 billion. I forgot their names, but the $3 billion guy, the $1 billion guy interviewed him and said, "Why don't you manage your own funds anymore?" And he said, I used to do that, and I made tons of money, obviously, and lost tons, but it never bothered me. And now I've grown older, I think about those pension funds and the people that need the money, and it really makes me feel terrible if I lose money. And you think, isn't that nice? He cares more. He actually became less effective when he cared more. He said, I don't do that anymore because I'm not as good. When he was calm, he was dispassionate, he was actually more effective. And what they found, back to your calm term, is the athlete who just remains calm, goes through the process. I'm shooting a free throw. Same way I always shoot free throws. They do better than the one says, now this is a different free throw or special free throw. When they do that, they focus on the outcome, not the process. And they forget. Tom, what does that mean to you? We don't choose our crisis chooses us.
Marshall, it reminds me of two principles that I always talk about when I'm teaching leaders about crisis. And the first is that crises come upon us in an unexpected way, or they wouldn't be a crisis. If we have perfect situational awareness and we see what's coming, we can usually fix it. And it's a funny thing about crises. They can always get worse. And we don't like to think in those terms because there's so much threat to it, but it's the truth. And the reason that it's so very important that leaders stay calm and that they project calm into their followers is that those followers know that things can get worse. And if a leader is already spun up in a given set of circumstances,
Right.
then the followers know that if it does get worse, they're going to be completely dysfunctional. And so I agree completely with what Alain said. And it's a little frustrating because Hollywood does us no favors. When Hollywood portrays leaders, that Hollywood director is trying to make everyone's heart beat faster in the theater.
Right.
And consequently, leaders are always portrayed as emotional and excited, sometimes angry, sometimes fearful. And it's all wrong. It's not the way professional crisis leaders operate in the field, whether that be a mountain climbing guide or a military person or just someone that routinely puts people in danger. And so it's a lot to overcome to make sure that people don't follow the Hollywood model and they do what their followers need, which is maintain calm, don't get angry, don't be fearful. Just give them what they need and keep them on the straight and level.
And that's another great, the emergency room is a great example. When Ronald Reagan got shot, how should we treat him? Like everyone else. You follow the procedure. You follow the procedure, you remain calm. Yeah, he's president of the United States. The procedure's there for a reason. The procedure's there for a reason. That's why we're doing this. It works. And if you start treating him different, his odds on getting better go down, not up. So, Tom, very good point. We don't think about being a professional in times of crisis. We think about a hero, not a professional. And in many ways, the hero is the professional. It's the person who goes up to that free throw line and blocks it out. And okay, I'm going to tell you a parable. The parable of the golfer and the beer can. The golfer is on the final hole, playing for the little club championships, all excited. And the foursome in front of him is noisy and troublesome and talking too loud and drinking. Very annoying. And he hits a final drive, right down perfectly, a little bit on the left side where he wants it to go, and just plop. It goes over into the rough. He doesn't know why. What happened? He walks toward the ball. He sees a beer can. Oh, he's so angry. That idiot in front of us left a beer can on the fairway and ruined my shot. And he walks to the ball. What does he need to do? Breathe. Breathe. Forget about the beer can. Forget about the drive. That's over. Forget about winning the club championship. If you're one shot behind, you go for the green, even though you have a low chance. If you're 3 shots ahead, you pitch on the fairway. You come up with a strategy. You breathe. You hit the shot that's in front of you. You hit the shot in front of you. Well, that's the key to crisis. Get everyone to breathe and hit the shot that's in front of them and calm down. Because if they don't, they're probably just going to whiff the ball. So excellent examples. And any more suggestions of how leaders can do a great job of navigating in these turbulent times? No. Alain.
Yeah. So if we think about it, I love the fact we've touched on this key word of calm, because for me, it's not just about the fact that you as the leader are calm, is the fact that, as we all have experienced, emotions are contagious. So if I'm stressed out as a leader, that stress is going to start to infect everyone else around me. And another way I like to think of it too, in terms of calm, is if you use the analogy of a pendulum, right? So if a leader's at the top kind of swinging a little bit back and forth, they might be thinking, I'm not doing that much, but down towards the bottom of that, your people are. And so realizing that, like you said, Marshall, taking the shot that's right in front of me, being precise, being intentional, and calming your central nervous system so that everyone else's central nervous system around you can start to slow down too. It's so important, because we have to realize, and there's been great research from anthropologists who actually studied troops of baboons, and we're related, we're all primates. And the fact is, members of the troop look at the alpha right? They look at the alpha every 15 to 20 seconds because they want to make sure they're okay. And if you think about what we're all experiencing right now in these turbulent times, in these crises, what are the thoughts and the questions we have? It's, what does this mean? What should I do? And am I going to be okay? And so we look to our leaders to set cues and give us little signs that, yeah, you're going to be okay. And we have to think proactively, knowing that people are having those questions and all of that uncertainty. And as we know from all sorts of things, nature abhors a vacuum. So if we don't fill that in with calm, with positivity, with here's the next action, and we just leave that space blank, people are going to fill it in with negativity. They're going to go, I don't know what's happening. So I think keeping in mind and being intentional about how we set people up, both the focus with the rational goal, but also at the emotional level, so that they can start moving forward and performing at their best.
And in the words of the immortal philosophers, the Bee Gees, emotion is making me crazy. Tom,
Exactly.
what idea do you have to help leaders navigate in these turbulent times?
Yeah, so I think it's only fair if we're telling people that they need to maintain calm, that we also tell them a little bit about how to do that. And the most fundamental way that I've been able to determine, using neuropsychology and studying this pretty closely, is for the leader to be focused outward, task focused. And the reason that works is that in order to perform tasks and to focus outward on the environment, you activate your prefrontal cortex. And the place in your brain where you feel negative emotions like fear and anger, that's a completely different place. That's the amygdala. That's a midbrain structure. And consequently, I have always taught leaders, when you feel yourself becoming angry or fearful, it's because you're not focused. If you try to tell people to control their emotions, they focus inward. And when that happens, the emotions get worse. But if instead you tell them to focus and to focus their people outward in terms of controlling their emotions as well, that works pretty well. It's also the reason that individuals who are very self-focused do very badly in crisis circumstances, because they're continually worrying about their own circumstances instead of focusing on the threat that's affecting their organization and their people. So outward focus, don't worry about yourself, worry about your people, worry about your organization, and you'll stay calm and be able to give them what they need.
Excellent, excellent. Now, there's an interesting paradox in today's times, because today we have social distancing, yet we still want to maintain a sense of connection. So we'll start with each of you. We're going to go with Alain, and then we're going to go with Tom. How can we do both? How can we maintain this sense of connection in the midst of distancing when we're not always there in person? Alain.
Sure, Marshall. So such an important piece. How do we stay with connection? And for me, it starts with understanding that this is not business as usual. This is, you want to call it the new normal? It is, right? We're having to deal with all sorts of different things. And it's not just working from home. It's working from home potentially with juggling a toddler on your lap, or pets, or fighting over who gets the internet access. I mean, these are unprecedented and crazy times. And so I think it starts with, first of all, having to make a shift to thinking of what's the context. And I think for leaders and organizations, a useful context shift is to think of, what if all of the people on your team, in some ways, think of them as consultants. That is, they need clearly defined scope of the project that they're working on, and they really don't need you telling them and prescribing exactly how they go about doing it. That you should be agreeing on the intentions up front of the outcomes, what they look like. And that might be It might take them 25 hours a week to get that done. It might take them 60 hours a week. But you've got to let go of the idea that you need to control all that. So we're in a new ball game. And so you have to understand. So the first thing is the context. And then beyond that, in terms of connection, I think this is a great time for leaders to lean in and be exceptionally human at this time. I don't think anyone's going to look back over this crisis period and go, Marshall was my boss and, he cared too much about me. Right. So,
Right.
and when I say that caring, now we're not saying that we all have to become professional psychologists and that work is devolving into group therapy. However, the definition of trauma is a deeply disturbing or distressing experience. And we're all experiencing that right now. And just giving your people, and it literally can take a minute to check in and say, how are you feeling today? What's going on? Just so people can calm themselves, because by doing that, you're actually normalizing. Psychologists call it normalizing the behavior, telling them that you're not feeling okay. That's okay. This is weird. These are weird times. So the second piece after context is this connection of just actually being interested enough and showing some empathy, right? So that they can get focused. And then the third piece is around communication, is making sure that we check in perhaps more frequently than we thought. And there's a big difference between checking in with somebody and checking up on them, right? We're not talking about micromanaging. And I think this is a conversation to have with people. So for some people, it might be once a week. Some people, it might be once a day or twice a day. But for you to say, I want to be here and support you, because everyone responds to this social distance in different ways. Some people are very resilient and can manage themselves at home quite well, and other people are really struggling. So making sure you establish the connection that works for the people, then you're going to have to adjust your strategy. So context, connection, and communication will help you to be more cohesive and be able to work through this in a more constructive fashion.
Very good. Very good. General Tom, what's your thought about
that's terrific.
Connection and distance?
Yeah, terrific answer. I'll tell you a quick story about my own organization when we started the distancing, and it was apparent that it was going to take a while. When I was in grade school, second grade, third grade, my lunchbox was often filled with summer sausage from a small artisan butcher that was in our little town of 1,800 people in Southern Illinois. And I called that butcher and I had him send a stick of summer sausage that once upon a time was in my Flintstones lunchbox, and had him send it to everyone in my organization with a note from me that explained where that sausage came from and the fact that I just wanted to reach out, and I knew they were staying home and maybe not eating the same kind of food and what have you. And it was deeply personal. And in some ways just frivolous. I mean, I sent them a summer sausage, but the impact on the organization when they got that was extraordinarily positive because it personalized what they were going through. And since then, I've sent them tamales, I've sent them other things. Just every few weeks, they get something unexpected from me. And that, I think, has done a lot to keep people on track in addition to the calls. The other thing I'd like to say is that, many of our organizations are complex in terms of how much exposure people have. I'm working with a beverage company right now, and so consequently, all their management and executives are pretty much working from home. But they have truck drivers, they have delivery people, they have people working in factories on the product. And so it's really important for leaders to understand the depth and breadth of that. And it's a really wise thing for leaders to show up at the point of most threat for people in those organizations. So ordinarily, a CEO would not put on a mask and gloves and hop in a delivery truck to go deliver beverages to a grocery store. But that's exactly what they have to do now. They have to accept the same amount of risk and connect in that way instead of huddling up in their third home in Colorado or somewhere. Leaders have to be present. They have to share risk. They have to show that they're engaged in the operations of the business. And sometimes that means putting on a pair of blue jeans and grabbing a mask and going where the action is.
Very good. Very good. It's interesting. I had a personal example of this over the weekend. Tom, do you know Hubert Joly, who was CEO of Best Buy? Have you met Hubert before?
Yes.
Anyway, he's a wonderful man. And Hubert, as you know, I don't know if you know, got married to Hortense, who was also in our group. So I fixed these two up, and so I was kind of the matchmaker here. And he ended up getting married, and we had, over the weekend, we had a virtual wedding with 100 people from different countries. A virtual wedding. I've never been to a virtual wedding before, an online wedding. It was wonderful. It was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. And they had this ceremony and had people show up, and I was the best man, and it was very touching. Hubert started crying twice in the middle of it, and it was just they had the parents there. They had people from France. Part of it was, they're both French. Part of it was in French, and part of it was in English, and it was really, to me, an example of, we were all in a way distant, yet actually I've been to a lot of weddings. This was better than almost any wedding I've ever been to. It was more personal, more human, and also the older people could show up. Maybe they couldn't fly all the way from France, but they could sit there in front of a computer and be there, and it was just touching. And the babies were there, and people would bring out the babies, and they were waving, and so it was just a very, very touching experience. And it pointed out, back to the topic, how we can be distant and be connected at the same time. So wonderful example of that. Tom, one of the things you talk about is resilience and burnout, which is a huge danger today. People are under so much pressure today. What's your advice on avoiding burnout and achieving resilience?
I think people need to recognize that we're in a marathon. We're not in a sprint. And the things that make us resilient on our best days are the same things that'll make us resilient when we're bearing the brunt of a crisis. So we have to take time for physical exercise. Every leader does. And if they don't maintain a certain level of personal fitness, they'll never be able to weather the storm. They also need to take time to play and to make sure that the people in the organization are taking time to play. When you're home all the time, it's easy to think that you're in some sort of vacation state, but that's not going to reconstitute you as a person. So you have to take the time to do that. When we went into Iraq, and I was there in 2003, I was in and out of numerous tanks and armored vehicles, and I never saw one that didn't have something in it that the soldiers could play with, whether it was a frisbee or a football or a soccer ball. And so those soldiers, when they'd get a break in combat, they'd literally toss a ball around. And it's the same way in the crisis we're in now. If you don't take time to work out a little bit, if you don't take time for play, it's going to weigh heavily on you. And the other thing that I usually tell people, work a little bit on better food and less alcohol. If you indulge yourself when you're in this kind of a place, particularly with alcohol, which we all know is a depressant, it'll really wear you down. So clean up your act a little bit, have a little bit of fun, have a little bit of physical exercise, and make sure your people are too. As leaders, we're responsible for the tone and tenor of the lives of the people that are working with us. And so it's just as important for them as it is for us.
Well, thanks to both of you. Thank you, Alain. Thank you. It was wonderful hearing from you. Thank you, Tom. Known you for many years, and thank you so much for your service to the country. Thank you for the great work you're doing at Rice. Thank you, Alain, for the great work that you're doing. Both of you are making the world a little bit better place. So very honored to know both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to everyone for listening. And again, the purpose of these shows is just maybe help you have a little better life. And one of my philosophies is, listen to people, hear what they have to say, and ask yourself, which part of this works for me? And I would encourage you, viewers and listeners, whatever works for you, just do that. If some of it doesn't work for you, it's okay. Just let it go. Don't focus on that. Focus on, what did Alain say that works for me? What did it work? And Tom, what did Tom say that works for me? Just do that. And if you pick one or two things from each one, maybe you'll have a better life. As I've grown older, my level of aspiration in life has actually gone down and down and down. My level of impact's gone up and up and up. Why? Quit worrying about what I'm not going to change. And so what's my goal? Help you have just a little better life. So thanks to everybody for participating and listening and doing this show. And thanks to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Marshall.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.